Back in the 1980s, one of the most common types of game to see for personal computers was the arcade port. Sometimes they were awesome, sometimes they were awful, and sometimes they were Ikari Warriors, the arcade game by SNK, released in 1987 by Data East USA and ported by Elite Systems Limited. The box is pretty typical stuff for back then, promising arcade realism at home and shoving in your face the idea that the game is the most amazing thing to ever happen in the history of humanity. It also provides some pretty darn good-looking screenshots, which sure do get me psyched to play the game because frick, this looks exactly like the arcade version. Speaking of the arcade version, it exists. Ikari Warriors, or Ikari Warriors, iRobot Warriors, iPad Warriors, however you pronounce it, was first released to arcades by SNK in 1986. The game featured two Rambo rip-off manly men, hailing from the man-filled manscape of Northwest Mandia from the year 1980 man, and was in fact SNK's first major hit in the USA. While it was essentially a tweaked clone of Capcom's Commando, Ikari Warriors had a pretty innovative little gimmick. Its cabinet featured rotary joysticks, which could not only be pushed in 8 directions like most other joysticks, but also rotated, so the player could move in one direction and fire in another. This version of the game is actually not a DOS game, but a PC booter. What this means is that the game bypasses any existent operating system and runs the game by simply inserting the floppy and booting your IBM-compatible PC. No messy command line stuff required. Inside the box, you get a PC booter disk itself, in this case on a 5 1/4 inch floppy, even though the box says it contains a 3 1/2 inch. It lied. You also get a manual, which is pretty typical black and white crap. It actually states it's for the Commodore 64 and 128 on the front, though inside you get some basic instructions for the IBM PC, Apple II, and of course the Commodore ports. Mine also came with this little sheet of paper, which appears to be part of a map from The Legend of Zelda. I don't think this was supposed to be included, but who knows, maybe you get to grenade Link in this game, that would be awesome. The game starts with a pretty simple selection of players and your control method, and, what is this? Ikari Warriors in the snow? Did nuclear winter happen while I wasn't looking? What happened to all those awesome colors? The arcade realism at home. Screens shown are from arcade version, computer version may vary. No, you don't say. Arcade realism at home. Well, I guess that's technically true. There's arcade realism on the back of the box, which is in your home. All kidding aside, it seems this PC version of Ikari Warriors only utilizes CGA and EGA graphics. Though I don't know why they didn't choose the other color palette for CGA, as the warmer tones would have made a lot more friggin' sense than the winter wonderland you're forced to walk through. You can switch over to EGA, which provides a much better selection of colors, all things considered, and I'd highly recommend it unless you just like the game looking like a bowl of Dippin' Dots melted on your screen. As far as the gameplay itself goes, it's not too shabby for a PC port of the time. Actually, I'd say it's pretty freaking awesome once you get over the fact that you don't have those sweet rotary arcade joysticks to use. You use the numpad on the keyboard to move your Rambo wannabe around, so that gives you your cardinal directions plus diagonals. It takes some serious getting used to since the only way to aim is to move in that direction, and due to the lower resolution and differing screen ratio from the arcade game, you have a much smaller playfield. But before long you do get used to this, and thankfully the game is made a bit easier to compensate for all of these changes. In addition to the movement keys, you have the Z, X, and C keys for your action buttons like shooting, getting in and out of vehicles, and tossing grenades. It's an acceptable enough layout, but I do wish you could change the key configuration as I prefer my hands to be a little bit closer together on the keyboard. But whatever, it doesn't get in the way of the main attraction, and that is killing dudes using guns, explosives, tanks, and sheer testosterone ejaculation. It may not be as intense as the arcade game, but it totally gets the solid gameplay feel down pat. This is just one of those games that I always intend to play for maybe a few minutes or a couple rounds, but before I know it, it's a half hour to 45 minutes later, and I haven't even realized it. Once you get past that initial clunkiness, you get into a certain groove of pattern learning, danger dodging, and mayhem that's just satisfying to experience time and time again. It's just a freaking cool game, and it's one of my favorite classic arcade games, even though I honestly suck at it. And it's got support for 2 players, so if you want to bring a friend along to get frustrated and volatile, then feel free. So yep, Ikari Warriors on the PC has some flaws, but taken as an overall experience, I'd say it succeeds as an arcade port for the PC. It's just plain fun, and as far as I'm concerned, that's really what counts in the end, even if the arcade realism at home promise is a bit far-fetched.